All right, let's do this thing. Hey, thank you so much for attending the ScaleThat Summit. I am essentially the co-founder of this event and your host for the entirety of it. So my good friend Alex Herndon and I had this idea all of probably about 3 weeks ago and thought, hey, what if we could take this kind of helpless feeling we have of the increasing amount of people that are now unemployed as a result of COVID and the helpfulness that we know that we could provide to our network and ultimately to those people that are in need in the midst of a really trying time. And then we kind of had this moment where we're like, I bet you other people are feeling that way. So we reached out to a few other people that we know that are really talented, really skilled communicators and marketers and business builders. And we thought, hey, here's how we're feeling. Are you feeling that way? Do you feel like there's a chance that you could jump in and help out on that front? And they said, yeah, sure, count us in. And then to really kind of the icing on the cake or however you want to look at it, we thought, man, what if we could do this to really benefit those that are genuinely, desperately in need, those that are hungry in the midst of all of this as well. And so we found this nonprofit called Feeding America that just is really well known in terms of its national distribution network to get food to those that are in need. And we thought, I wonder if there's this wild hair, like crazy idea that we could actually give 100,000 pounds of food to those guys. So we did the math, we figured it out. We thought, man, if we could just get this many ticket sales, then we could hit that number and obviously give the proceeds of the ticket sales to that effort. And so off we went. So we made a few phone calls, connected a few dots, and what you're enjoying today is really the culmination of all of those efforts. So thank you. I'm humbled by the response of this thing. I'm humbled by the speakers that we have. We've got Benton Crane from Harmon Brothers. We've got Rand Fishkin. We've got Oren. And we've got just amazing folks that have sold literally millions of books, have produced videos that have been seen by millions of people, have sold millions. If one guy coming up, a guy named Thomas Shipley, has sold $1 billion worth of things to people. I mean, come on, how blessed are we to have this group of folks? So that is what has transpired. That's what's to come. I'm super excited about the content that you're about to just enjoy as a result. A little bit of housekeeping. So this is an online summit, but ultimately what it is a on-demand group of content for folks like you to enjoy at their will. We're going to make this available for at a minimum of 6 months. So that folks can obviously jump online and pace their learning and jump in and pick keynotes that really feel like they are relevant to them in that moment. And also we want to keep this thing open as long as possible to get enough proceeds for that to give away 100,000 pounds of food, if not more. So that is our goal, and that's why we're keeping this thing open and self-paced so that you have access to this content on an ongoing basis and it can help you throughout your journey. So I'm going to dive in here just with my presentation, and I lovingly called it kind of your mindset and your map to success in this trying time. The reason I started with mindset is we are going to get esoteric here for the next few minutes. There's a reason behind that. And the rationale of that is that if your mind and your heart aren't right, then your hands and your feet aren't going to go in the right direction. And they're sure aren't going to go that way for a long distance of time. And so if we don't get this right and this right in a really trying time, then ultimately, we can work until, we don't have any, we're bloody in the knuckles or whatever the analogy is that you want to use, and our feet are tired, but we're ultimately going to run out of steam. And I know this from experience. So, it's interesting. I wrote 2 words up here that quite some of you guys might find uncomfortable. I know that the first one here is fear. This is an emotion that we're all readily experiencing right now. Second to that is this word faith. Faith in a non-religious sense is really the context of hope and something that isn't seen. And the reality is what we're reacting to currently is the things that we can see. People walking around with masks, people on ventilators, the numbers coming in day after day. And all of that is genuinely scary. It is superbly scary, and I'm not undermining any of that. It is a unique time. Second to that is what I think has the ability to carry us through is this hope in something that we haven't seen. Up here it says the word unknown. It's something that is unknown. We don't know what the next few months are going to look like. We don't know what the new reality is going to look like and the new normal on the other side of this. But I will tell you, at some point, there will be a new normal. There will be a breath of fresh air that we all get to enjoy outside of a mask and ideally in the same room together. And I get excited about that. And I know you guys are all aware of that. You're hungry, aspiring entrepreneurs, business owners, etc. And here's who ideally we're talking to right now, today, throughout these courses, throughout these keynotes, is here's kind of my heart behind this whole thing, is I want to be talking to that amazing small to mid-sized business that maybe was a regional player in their spot, maybe just ran a single shop where they were selling some goods, but unfortunately you've taken it on the chin and you found yourself in a new reality and in a new space. Well, here's kind of a little bit about us and the group that I brought together for you guys. All of us are pretty good at online advertising, and I don't say that with a lot of ego. It's just that the industry that we chose to become quote unquote experts in. Here at ScaleThat, for our select group of clients, we're spending north of $1 million worth of advertising a month for our clients. We're managing that ROI profitably. Obviously, you wouldn't spend that much money if you weren't generating that profitability and ROI for folks. And that is chump change compared to Ralph Burns, who his collective agency is spending $100 million on ads. And so what all that means is if you are maybe that small business owner. I've got a good friend that runs a company called Acme Fine Goods here in Louisville, Colorado. He's running this brilliantly curated shop of just kind of menswear and just cool stuff like that. Now he has no choice but to take that business online to some extent and continue to fulfill and take care of companies in that. What I want to do is provide for you also second to the second chapter of my talk, if you will, is a map. And a map to success and a map to understanding digital advertising in a way that is obviously tactical and important and palpable and kind of you can get your arms around it, but also that you can actually start to practice that. And so that's really where we're going. So back to the mind. So my heart's desire is that we could use the credibility and some of that experience that we have to help you get to a place where you will no longer find yourself in a state of fear, but of faith and of hope and in what is now becoming known throughout that. So a little bit about me personally. So 4 years ago, my wife and I, we had our first kid, and he came 2 months early, and it totally just caught us off guard. And that moment where what was known is that there was a due date and there was a birth plan and all of those types of things, those were all right there in front of us. And when you have a moment, in our case 2 months early, where what is known becomes unknown and uncharted territories, things get scary. And you kind of have some choices in that moment. You can either buckle down, you can assess. A good friend of mine, Thomas Shipley, is going to talk about even just kind of a military style engagement in terms of how to assess a situation. And you can act. And you can work through that. Here we actually had our second kid in the last year or so, and we were sitting in our 20-week appointment for her, and the doctors came in and let us know that she was actually going to be born with some special needs. And I will tell you, I had all of those same feelings, if not at an exponentially magnified in a broader sense this time around. And here I thought that, Eli, our 4-year-old, was going to be kind of the penultimate level of stress going through that as a family, but ultimately he was kind of the prologue. He was the beginning. He was like kind of chapter 1 of a multi-act drama. And what I learned from that is that stress and resilience and these things are actually important attributes and important things to learn how to navigate that. What I learned throughout all of the last 3 or 4 years of parenthood is, number one, to ask for help, and that it's okay to ask for help. And so what you have before you is a group of 20 plus speakers that are here to help. And I guarantee, I won't make too many promises on all their behalf, but I know their hearts and I know who they are, is that if you were to reach out with a single question for any of them, of course they'd be really ready, willing, and able to help. And I think that comes at it with a bit of humility. And so I'd encourage you guys to do that. Number two, I would say there are certain things that you can't control, and there are certain things that you can control in the midst of stressful times. A good friend of mine that you're going to be hearing from throughout this is a guy named Robbie Vitrano. And Robbie will share with you in his video that literally just about every business that he launched, he happened to launch it right on the eve, if not right on the day of a national crisis, if not a worldwide crisis, 9/11, Katrina. I'll let him tell you his story. Some things that you'll hear echoed throughout these presentations is that we do have a challenge right in front of us. And we have within that is ambiguity that's eating us up, and there's a certain amount of risk within all of that. And that's really the kernel of truth. That's the kernel of things, and all those things are true. So it's important not to demoralize or diminish that. It is all true. It is all very scary. And I think that what you do with that emotion is important. So as we take what is known, what is right in front of us, there's this thing that has impacted our business, has impacted our lives, and has introduced a certain amount of risk that wasn't there before. How do we handle that? So I've sought counsel on this. So these are not exactly my words, but other people that I've sought out in the middle of my 4-year journey of stress and angst in the middle of that. And what I will tell you is that at the end of the day, there's if you take it to a military style analogy, there is a war that is going on. There's something that is going on outside of our immediate control. What is under our quote unquote control is this thing called a battle. And if you look at historically why battles are lost, one, they're lost on typically two things. One is infighting. They're lost on essentially lack of alignment between your troops, right? And so they think that the enemy is in here and not out there. You can see why that would be dangerous. Secondly, they're lost on lack of resources. And sometimes this is just beyond all of our control. Flat out, the food dries up, the money dries up, and circumstantially, there's a lack of resources that equates to a place where just unfortunately, you just run out. The third thing is an inability to adapt as a team. Fourth, inability to focus. I have a good friend that Ryan Dice, that he calls it kind of sporking it. And I think that's a funny analogy, but it hopefully lands the plane for you, is that sometimes, you can be a decent spooner and you can be a decent fork, but you kind of end up sporking it where you actually just kind of are really not great at either of those things. I don't know if you've used a spork to try to cut something, but it's not a great experience. And then fifth is an inability to re-resource. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but there are things, people, assets out there that are in place for you to resource your business. The payroll protection program, all of these things that are popping up. And if you're like me, you spent a good amount of time pursuing some of those, getting to know some of those things, and really even kind of reworking how you resource your organization. And that is kind of step one in addressing this. But the first and foremost thing is, what are you aligned on? What are you going after as a team? So I can't define that for you right now. I don't know your context, and we'll get into that. But what I will tell you is defining those things on a weekly, if not daily basis is really dang important right now. In our company and our team, we talk about the big three for that week. What are those big three things that if everything else falls off the map for whatever reason, what are those big three things that if we don't nail and execute that week, that next week, the week after that, consequences will follow. So, and then this fifth thing I'll touch on just really briefly, this inability to re-resource. At the end of the day, whether you're constricting and kind of getting into a place where everything is like pushing in, right? You might have to unfortunately make some hard decisions around in-house resources. You might have to make some hard decisions around business model and all of those types of things. The importance is that you do re-resource, because in my opinion, walking through the economic downturn of 2008, this is actually a really good time to double down and to get aggressive in the right direction and to make progress. And so we'll talk about that more on the map side of things, but that's the opinion. So at ScaleThat, what that looks like for us is we have made the decision, and this was a decision made roughly almost a year ago, to actually not build a huge internal agency ourselves, but rather to use network partners to connect people with that are at the right size and the right budget within their goals. And so what that looks like is that we can actually not have a lot of bias in the solutions that we're creating for people, but ultimately just connecting them with the right people. And then ourselves, what we own within that is the strategy that we kick off those resources to go after. And then we match up the right freelancer, contractor, small to mid-sized agency, you get it, with that company based on that plan. And so that's how we help people re-resource, if you will, whether it's to grow or scale, and then identify that. So moving on to the unknown, and I think this is what's important. You'll hear a good buddy of mine named Andrew Devlin really talk about navigating uncertainty. And I won't steal his thunder, but what he will do is kind of unwrap what it looks like to really kind of walk through the unknown. So at the end of the day, the reason that things that we hope in are scary or unknown to us is because we don't know what they look like. The analogy I would use is our flashlight only goes so far. We don't know what's beyond the darkness, and that's a scary feeling at a human nature level. But there are some things that are in our control. There's not a lot. Daily for me, that looks like 2 or 3 things that I can control daily. So focus in on those things. One thing, just to land the plane on mindset fully and just kind of what day-to-day mindset looks like. For me, this is kind of goofy, but we'll go for it. This is my buddy. You might recognize him. His head's a little bit bigger than it was in the movie, but this is William Wallace. So kind of a stupid little anecdote, but it works for me tremendously, is before any presentation, before any sales call, before any big moment and throughout my week, I'll glance at this little guy, and that's kind of silly. But what he does is he reminds me of really ultimately someone that I aspire to, someone that's a hero. And so a question that I would actually just ask of yourself in this moment is, who is someone that you aspire to be? Who is someone that you, it's kind of maybe your alter ego, that you want to be on your best days. These little guys are relatively cheap. You can pick them up, but they're kind of fun. Fatheads, I forget what the name of the company is, but you can pick them up. And what I do is, no matter how tired I am, how distracted I am, before I jump on that call or that presentation, I can glance down at William Wallace and I can go, you know what? Somewhere in your bones, you've made a commitment and a decision to be that guy. And that's who you are on your best day. There's also a version of me, which I'll share maybe at another presentation, is me on my worst day. All right, go for it. Curious George is kind of like who I am on my worst day. I can be just a hot mess, and it can create a bunch of commotion and have to really find the man in the yellow hat. But picking those things for you and creating a shortcut to those things in your head so that you can wire up and navigate some of these challenging times is an important little, I hate to use the word hack, but a hack that you can use to help step into a mindset of being someone that you want to be or aspire to be in challenging times. From there, what I appreciate about stepping into things with a mindset of hope and of kind of faith in what's in the future is that can actually require, and it takes discipline, and you can have that, but it also takes humility to go, you know what, there's some things out there, this war, like I mentioned earlier, that's outside of our control. So what I want to do is really just make sure that before we step into this, that number one, write down who you are on your best day. And it could be, ideally it's a superhero, ideally it's a movie character or something like that. Number 2, write down who you are on your worst day and be okay with that. And number 3, write down some things that you've walked through. I shared a few things that I've walked through in my life that have generated stress, that have generated fear, that on the other end of them, that ultimately I have come out in a better place. And there's muscle memory from going through that experience, right? Weightlifting breaks down muscles so that they are built back stronger. So we are in, as a world, a time where muscles are being broken down. Write down some times in a past chapter of your life where you've actually taken that time, you've been broken down, and those muscles, quote unquote, came back stronger. That stress, that fear introduce that into your world. So I'm going to take all 20 seconds. I'm going to let you write those 3 things down. What I would do is at least write down blank spots, or just pause the video and make sure you get that down, because I think it'll pay dividends for you. So to recap, 1, you're kind of who you are on your best day. 2, who you are on your worst day. And 3, a moment in time where stress or fear, you've navigated it and ultimately come out for the better. So thanks so much for diving into that with me. I know that could have been a little bit awkward, just getting a little bit esoteric in the middle of a marketing conference, but I'm 100% confident that if you don't get your mind right and your heart right, that you're not going to be ready for the journey ahead. So thanks for doing that. Now let's talk about the hands and the feet, like the doing of this thing, the map of this thing. Like I mentioned, there's this tool here at the beginning that's the funnel. It's going to be pretty intuitive to a lot of you guys. What's not as intuitive is the bottom part of this. It looks kind of like an hourglass. So if you've been in sales or marketing, any presentations around that, you've talked about the top of the funnel, and that makes sense. It's kind of, it's the sexy part, it's the interesting part, because it's talking about customer acquisition. Customer retention it doesn't get as much press, but it's just as important, if not more important. And what I mean by that is, here in the midst of a compressed economy, potentially, and all the things that we're walking through, the opportunity to take care of your existing customers is just as important, if not more important, than to acquire new customers. And so we'll get into that here in a minute. But if this is your first foray into online advertising or marketing in general, there's 2 numbers that made me fall in love with this thing back in 2007 and 8, when I really got into digital. And really, quite ironically, through the last economic downturn. And that was the number that I got kind of interested in, was this number, CPA, cost per acquisition. What does it cost you to acquire a customer? What does it cost you to acquire a lead? Important numbers for obvious reasons. And what is ultimately the lifetime value of that customer? So if it costs you $100 to acquire a customer, and you make $1,000 over the course of that customer being with you on a predetermined amount of time, it could be 3 months, could be 12 months, could be 2 years, then guess what? You're right side up 10x. Now the goal here, and where it gets a little bit sticky, is the distance between these 2 numbers, right? And so that's where other numbers come into fact, like average order value. You get the point. We work with some good friends that actually have a charge card that helps kind of people get financed in between that gap of an acquisition cost and the lifetime value of that. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely reach out. So at any rate, those are the 2 numbers. That's the important part of it. Now at the top of the funnel is 4 letters that are equally important. PESO, acronym, is paid media, earned media, shared media, and owned media. So this is just fancy marketing ease for, this is where you're paying for advertising. This is where you're earning your media. This is what's traditionally called earned media, or PR, shared media, which is just people sharing your content, sharing your product. And owned media is a really simple way of talking about your lists that you own, or the traffic that's naturally coming to your site or into your store. So an important thing to do as you evaluate your business in this new normal is to ask yourself, what are you really good at? What do you really enjoy? Where is some competency? And if you have a following in person, then guess what? You own a good amount of customers. Maybe you haven't acquired their email addresses, but you hopefully there's some creative ways to get in front of them. You can actually pull data from your register. Second to that, like for us personally at ScaleThat, we're really good at paid media. We have good competency in that. I, as a creative, have a decent amount of ability of creating content that is shareable, that people get excited about. That's something that I enjoy. I'm not great, as you well know, through if you've done a little bit of research on us, we don't own a big list. We just got started. We have a few thousand email addresses. We don't have a huge following online, so we're not great at that. And, as exciting as the Feed America thing is, we haven't gotten national pickup for the ScaleThat Summit because there's a lot of other stuff going on in the PR space right now. So evaluating that realistically is really important as you start to think about where you're going to get awareness for your product. So let's just talk about 2 different product categories just for sake of walking someone through. So let's just talk about a physical good or something. So I've got a buddy that runs a brick and mortar store called Acme Fine Goods. They do curated goods of like menswear and things like that. So he's really, really cool. So here's the unfortunate reality. He's found himself in a place where he doesn't have access to his store anymore, but he has access to his vendors, his people that create these things. So let's just say that Eric wakes up today and he's like, you know what? I'm going to create a product. And actually to map some of this thinking, what we'll do is actually, let's think about this way before we dive into these details. So let's just say Eric in this new reality is having to pivot a little bit. And he puts together, and what he knows about his business is that he has a good reach to people that are into men's wear. All right, let's just play around with that. He also has reach into people that like to buy local, all right? And he knows that his people don't take themselves too seriously, right? They like to have fun, they like to wear fun clothes, whatever. So that's what he knows about his people. Now his product used to be a brick and mortar store with a lot of like in-person product. You walk in, you check it out, you buy a vest, whatever. His product, yes, he can buy that online and do some interesting things like that, but how's he going to kind of make this transition into online advertising at scale? What if he took an existing relationship with a vendor? Maybe they're people that make bandanas for sake of whatever. And he calls them up and says, hey, let's just say Carhartt for crying out loud. So Carhartt has that big duck canvas. Anyways, like, hey, what if could you make a run of custom bandanas that has Acme Fine Goods on it and has something funny or cheeky or interesting across the front that just kind of catches your eye. All right, so let's do custom bandanas. And I know this is not a brand new idea. I'm just doing it on the fly as an example. So he has custom bandanas. So now you have something to convert on. And so he picks custom bandanas with Acme Fine Goods on it. But they're cool, they're interesting, kind of, make people smile ideally. Custom bandanas. Now, in this new world, he can figure out his acquisition cost, and if it cost him, let's call it $10, which is a good chunk of money, to acquire people through, maybe he does $1,000 of advertising, he has 10 conversions, whatever the math turns out to be there, that actually would be pretty good. Then or not that great, $100 an acquisition cost. Say he has, sorry, it's late in the afternoon, you get the math. Say it cost him $10 to acquire a customer through a landing page featuring these custom bandanas. And then he utilizes his own list of people that he knows, and he just sends them an email and he says, hey, I got this, or he posts on Instagram where he has a big following. Now he's tested out something and he has an acquisition cost where he's right side up. Then he can get into a place where he's like, cool, we have a fresh conversion. Now I've retained a customer. How do I bring them into a place where he has created something interesting? And maybe he's created a COVID survival kit. So he's taken some of those goods, and he has relationships with just kind of cool outdoor survival type of stuff. So he puts together a kit that costs $100, right? And he could very well retarget them with things that he sells on his website, but at the end of the day, maybe there's things that other people could buy. Now you get into a kit that's a COVID survival kit, and people buy that for $100, and he's right side up $10 on this $20 bandana, and he emails these people and he's right side up on a $100 purchase of that. Say he emails 100 people and 10 people buy that kit. Eric has just stepped into the world of online advertising and marketing. Pretty cool, right? Let me just show you a little bit about how this works if it's a product that's not well known, right? So where it gets a little bit more complicated, say you go through this process and you create a product that is not well known, that has not a lot of awareness around it, but you've got to figure out how to get that in front of some people. Now that's where this is important. Awareness is actually the most challenging part of this whole model. A guy wrote a book called Breakthrough Advertising. His name escapes me in the moment, but he talks about these 5 stages of awareness. There's unaware, there's people that are just unaware of what you've created. There's people that are problem aware. They're like, yeah, okay, let's just take whatever that cushion is that sits in between the seats that, like keeps your wallet and your keys and stuff like that from falling between that. So people are aware of that problem, but they don't know there's a solution out there. Boom, how do you get them from problem to solution aware? And then how do you get them to product aware and then being most aware? So let's just take the cushion infomercial-y thing. Humor is a thing, or in their case, pardon me, what's cool about that is there's a problem that we're all aware of. We've all lost our keys or wallet, at least I have a few times, between the seat cushion and my vehicle and the console. So I'm aware of the problem. What I need to do is show the audience a video or just a single picture of what I call it is, does this look familiar or does this sound familiar? Have you ever been here where you've lost your wallet? Sure enough, I'm going to show you a quick demo of what it looks like not to lose your wallet. Sure enough, there's this gap that's covered. Congrats. And I'm going to provide a testimonial of John Doe, from Texas. It's like, I used to always lose my wallet. Now I don't. It's amazing. I can do that. I'm a native Texan. So testimonial. And then here's why infomercials still to some extent work today is they provide a sense of novelty to that, right? Why now? Normally this thing is $29.99. Today only it's $19.99 and we'll include free shipping and handling. Great. Before you know it, people are clicking there. Boom, they get their little foam insert in their car. They're not losing their wallet anymore, and they moved all the way from being just problem aware to being solution aware, product aware, most aware, and converting. This is why I think the brilliance of my friend Benton and what his team does is so amazing, is because before Squatty Potty existed or Poopery, I didn't even know those solutions existed. I knew about some of those problems. Direct-to-consumer mattresses is a good example. I think they've worked with Purple. I knew that my back hurt but I didn't want to go through the whole rigmarole of mattress companies and all those types of things. And what they do so brilliantly is they take humor in their case and they move someone down through that funnel. So that's pretty dang powerful. Let's just say you offer a service or something that's not as exciting as a direct-to-consumer mattress or a foam insert that goes in your car. Let's just say you're offering, say, a service or software. So HubSpot has just done a fantastic job over the last really decade now of getting in front of people, and where their original success came from was this thing called a website creator tool. And what a website creator tool said is, at the time, marketing automation and content marketing really wasn't that popular. It really wasn't a known entity. But what HubSpot knew was if they get in front of people that are trying to market online, ideally have a website, and they graded that website, that would pre-qualify and build the right audience. So what they did, they ran some ads against this thing called a website grader tool. So you have right here, you have a website grader tool. And that was their lead acquisition strategy. So here's ads. Does your website suck? Probably not the original copy, but something, does your website suck? Or is your website not converting? Who knows, right? But that was the ad. And they knew that if they got some people in there and moved them into it and converted them on a demo, likely in their case, that they could figure out the acquisition cost of that and move people into a place where they would retain. Now, how does that relate to these 5 stages of awareness? They're inspiring you on how you could have a better website. Then they use that as an opportunity to highlight the problem that you could be experiencing. They make you aware of the solution. And before you know it, you're product aware on a phone call with a demo or doing a trial. And at that point, all it takes is typically a salesperson to call you up at the end of the month and say, hey, John Doe, I noticed that you downloaded and checked out our demo software. Tell you what, I got permission, especially today here at the end of the month, to actually discount that by $100 for your software. Tell you what, are you interested or not? That's called novelty or creating a why now moment for your customer. So if you're creating something brand new, because of what we've all walked through, there's a high probability that you're gonna have to walk people through all 5 stages of these of awareness. The shortcut to that is to look for a product or someone that's solving a similar problem, and to actually go after, to some extent, their audience and their interests, and to actually kind of create an audience that looks like the people that are actually going after and getting excited about that, and some success can come from that. Because the reality is the further up you go, up to unawareness, the more expensive it's gonna be to move that customer into a mindset of buying and actually converting on your product. So ideally, you test this out with the audiences that you own and you move them through. So let's workshop this a little bit. So before we get all excited about net new customer acquisition, which is great, say you're really good at earned media. And we kind of did this a little bit with Eric earlier, where he had a custom bandana that he created, and he had a landing page for it. And now he actually shortcutted this process here, because he didn't have to go for people that were aware of him, and then he converted them here. So what is Eric to do if he wants to expand on that offer and have success? What I would recommend him to do is actually not to go straight to just a single, straight from a paid, say Facebook ad to a landing page, but actually what he's gonna have to do is create some ad creative of someone wearing this new bandana. All right, just for sake of argument. Now he can test that ad creative and then see if that landing page converts at the same rate, and he can get that all done. So what I would encourage you to do is take, a blank sheet of paper in front of you and write this all out. Sketch that out with 3 boxes and get your 3 boxes going right there. Now here's where this gets really exciting. If you are, if you have success here, which ideally you do, then you can move on to an entire workflow that goes from here to that kit that we talked about, just for example. What's also interesting is, if you really think about it, AT&T has done this pretty brilliantly in the last little bit. So AT&T in these unique times is actually, I think what I would call a customer retention strategy is, that's also heartwarming as well. So what they're offering right now is 3 months of free service to nurses, first responders, people that are in the trenches of this thing. And what's interesting about that, and I apologize if I sound a little cynical, is that what's gonna happen within that is that nurses and folks in that scenario are actually gonna share, and that's gonna shortcut to a place of advocacy for AT&T. And what's interesting is now those nurses are gonna go, you know what, I'm with AT&T. They actually just recognized us as first responders, and they gave us a 3-month notice around that, that we can actually not have to pay our bill for the next 3 months. What that creates is word of mouth, and guess what? That next customer that gets excited about AT&T through that, guess what AT&T got to do? They didn't have to pay for them, right? And I don't know the stipulations of the deal. If net new customers that are first responders don't have to pay for 3 months, maybe that's the deal, but at the end of the day, if it costs AT&T a few $100 to acquire a customer, which is probably true, they saved that $200 for net new customers, and they were able to do that in the context of saying no to some immediate revenue right now. So going back to the power of knowing these numbers, if you know that your lifetime value of a retained customer is north of $200, in this case, then you could probably give up some money to actually retain and keep that customer, knowing full well that there's a word of mouth that will be created from net new customers that you didn't have to go to the top of the funnel and pay for. And second to that, that a retained customer is better than a lost customer. And so we all know that there's probably cheaper wireless service providers out there than AT&T, But that nurse, that first responder, didn't take the time to sit down and look at their budget and go, yeah, I probably shouldn't be spending $150 a month on my bill, because they didn't have to think about their bill that month. And that, again, is an albeit cynical view of retention, but is a powerful way to look at the bottom of the funnel. So think about that in the context of where you can take care of your existing customers in this unique time. Let's just do one last model, just for sake of just really driving this point home. Let's do a service model. Say you're running a service company. I happen to run a service company, so this one's hit home with us. Our typical strategy in a service company is standing on stages, right? So this is a typical awareness part of it. And then offering something from those stages. So like in a past, capacity, what I would do is say, hey, we happen to offer this thing called a 3 Ps workshop. It's a half day or a full day option of coming in-house here and learning a ton about marketing. What is wrong with all 3 of those things in our current predicament? Those don't exist. This does exist, but an in-person workshop doesn't exist anymore. So how do you rework that whole thing to make sure that you can still kind of work someone through? At ScaleThat, what we've done is actually not created an entire agency. We don't run a big full service agency ourselves here. We actually just connect people with the right people to get that done. See, both Alex and I have done that. We've sold our agencies. We have, as a result, built an amazing Rolodex of freelancers, contractors, other agencies that can help out people. Now, directly, we take care of a half dozen clients a year. On the paid media side of things, we're running about $1 million worth of ads through that right now. But ultimately, our goal of ScaleThat.com, the platform, is to connect people through the right strategy with the right people. So we have to think about this a little bit differently, right? Now, we could just do a consultation, which is kind of a normal thing in the service business. But what if I adapted that 3 Ps workshop into a cheaper alternative than a full day, which, like those, depending on the complexity of that, we would do actually a full 2-week breakdown. Could be, as close to $10,000 to get all that strategy and that consulting done and the whole breakdown. What if we did a right-sized Zoom call and, talked to someone for 2 hours, and then for a smaller price, gave them this strategy deck and presented that to them, and then said, hey, you should get connected with these 2 or 3 right-size partners within your budget and your timeline to actually go and grow your business. So the only thing for us to then go solve is how do we get in front of people from an awareness standpoint. So lo and behold, again, outside of the online summit and all this type of stuff, that's not what I'm here for. We're here to give away money. Is what we're going to be doing next week is running some ads of us explaining this business model and helping people understand that. And what we'll figure out is an acquisition cost, and understand that if we're right side up on the back end of a few conversions, then we have a sustainable business model and can move something into a place where we're supporting and training and connecting people for the long haul with retention, adoption, and advocacy for what we do. So what I would encourage you, if you're running a service, is to actually really analyze your entry point offers, make sure that they make sense for our current climate, and that they're remote friendly, and that you can reevaluate some of the top of the funnel elements. Second to that, like we already talked about, think about how you can take advantage of take care of your existing customers, and really create some strategies within that part of it. So I know this got a little bit fast-paced as we were kind of working through a few different examples. What I intended to do there is to show you, a small size brick and mortar company, software company, a service company, and really work through that all through. If you don't know where to start, I would really encourage you to start back at these 3 Ps right here. The people that you own, the product that you can get in front of them, and the positioning that makes sense. So like in a dire worst case scenario circumstance, you run a travel agency. What's interesting is, things are not all doom and gloom. What you do know is how to get in front of probably families and ideally some wealthy people that have some discretionary income to, to spend on vacations. So now what you can do is actually use this to diagnose and go, what is a product? What is something that we could sell that same customer base that is, in this new normal? Again, just getting kind of creative, dire, worst case scenario. What if you just put together like a Tahiti family experience, kit? Again, just kind of making it up. So we have a Tahiti experience kit. So you have families that are sitting home, bored, want to create some experiences. You put this whole thing together for, $200. You get some drink mixes, some recipes, some board games, whatever, and you create this whole experience that feels like they're on the beach. And now you, at the very least, you own this audience. You just need to introduce a new offer to that audience that makes sense for them and the right positioning for that. And then I've already walked you through the process of how to test that out. So if you can, and I know I've got a lot of words up here, if you can take, let's say you're at stage 1. Say you don't have a product that's working, that's not like converting. Start here. Stage 1, identify the right people, then identify the right product, and then identify the positioning. If then statement number 1, if that new product is something that no one is aware of and they don't understand or get, then go to stage 2, where you have to work through the 5 stages of awareness and ideally create an asset or a set of assets that makes people get excited about this. So that goes back to that infomercial example, etc. If it's a product that's well known or there's something that's already like it in the market, then you could probably get away with just doing one creative asset to support the top of the funnel on the paid awareness side of things. So maybe it's just a single image of this Tahiti experience night, and you just test that out and get that out there. Now, if you understand your conversion costs on that, or your conversion path on that, you get your right messaging, and you get the right conversion costs on that, it's off to the races, and you can move all the way through. If that doesn't work, you probably broke something over here around people and not getting in front of them in the right way, or you assume that people understood the problem that you were solving for and they actually didn't. So you actually need to create a creative asset above that to reinforce the problem and help people understand that maybe a family game night isn't exciting on week 5 of lockdown. So again, kind of an uncanny and kind of a weird example, but hopefully that gives you a step-by-step process of going, okay, if my product's broken, if it's no longer converting, let's go and consider the people that I serve. If that's all solved and working, then let's figure out at what stage of awareness we need to move people through and move all the way that all the way through. If acquisition costs are not something that you know, which I would say in the years of doing this, 5 to 10% of people that we've worked with really genuinely know those, like dialed in on the back of the, they know it off the top of their mind. It probably is important to figure that out. There's these things called tracking pixels that you can put into your cart and make sure that you're tracking where those acquisitions came from and how much it costs to get there if you're doing online advertising. If you're not, I would just work up a really basic spreadsheet of going, hey, we sent 1,000 people to this landing page from an email address, and lo and behold, divide that out and you understand kind of roughly your conversion rates on that and how much it costs to operate, et cetera. So you could kind of get lost in a big jumbled kind of mess there, but ideally you get to a pretty clean number or just an estimated number on both fronts so you can understand if the juice is worth the squeeze, as they say. So what's really, I think, if I could kind of put this out there as the holy grail, imagine a system where you understand that for every $1 you spend here at the top of the funnel, you either A, make an immediate ROI on that in that first week or 2 of those dollars being invested, and or B, you make up for it in the lifetime value of that customer acquisition. That is the power of online advertising, and that's the power of what is going to be shared with you in these keynotes to come, is really how to maximize that. But hopefully this is a good framework just to understand and interpret what you're going to hear. If you're looking to move someone all the way through, Benton Crane and his team are great at that. If you're just getting started, Simon and his team at Socialite are great at walking you through how to level up and work throughout that. And there's a host of other folks like Ralph Burns that spend $100 million, annually on moving people through on the paid side of things. So utilize this utilize this worksheet to go back, fill in these assets, and then complement that with the knowledge that you're going to gain from all these experts that have lent their time and the wisdom and expertise throughout this. And above all, reach out to us if you have any questions. And thank you so much for donating your time, your money towards this effort to give away 100,000 pounds of food to people that are genuinely in need. And I hope that this is nourishing to you and your business and energizing as you go throughout these keynotes and enjoy this content. Appreciate you guys. You can reach me at Beau at ScaleThat. That's just BEAU at ScaleThat.com.